Tanki. Reading from Prabhupada, Volume 6, Uniting Two Worlds. This is from 1975 to 1977. And we're in chapter entitled At Home in India. Bombay, November the 1st. Srila Prabhupada's plane from Nairobi arrived in Bombay at 1 a.m. Yet even at such an early hour, he was greeted at the temple by a gathering of intimate life members, disciples, and even some of the tenants on the land. When the group followed him to his room, he confided that he had had a serious accident and he even showed them the scar on his knee. He said he was relieved to be back. In a letter from Bombay, he wrote, "The accident was very disastrous, but still Krishna saved. Perhaps I may stay here for some time for finishing our temple construction on this land." ISKCON Bombay was Srila Prabhupada's office, and he immediately got to work. He fired the engineer whom he held responsible for the poor slow work and stolen building materials. This is quite typical in the construction industry. Somebody is quite keen to get the job as the boss, so they can start manipulating the materials on the building site. It's a perk for them. At first, Prabhupada had tried to avoid hiring a construction company by having Surabi oversee the whole project, assigning work to various subcontractors, but that wasn't working. That's another lesson there, is that sometimes we have to actually employ the materialists to do the job and have things properly under contract. Because it's more important, Prabhupada, you could see he was putting the emphasis on building the temple as opposed to just giving the devotees something to do. He'd prioritised like that. Srila Prabhupada wanted a change, but there was no clear alternative. "We have come to Krishna consciousness for a life of eternal bliss," he said to Surabi, "but instead of eternal bliss, I am suffering eternal anxiety." He appealed to Surabi Giriraj and the others to do something. One day, a life member, a construction engineer, visited the site and told Srila Prabhupada the temple and hotel could easily be completed in 6 months. Prabhupada then berated Surabi, who said that 6 months' time was not enough. "Now I am nowhere," thought Surabi, "I'm losing my service." Then another life member, Mr. Omkar Prakash Deer, the chief engineer with ECC, one of India's largest, most reputable construction companies, came to the Sunday feast and examined the work. Appalled at the poor quality, he said that after 2 or 3 years it would fall apart. Giriraj, impressed with the idea of hiring Bombay's biggest, most competent construction firm, spoke with Prabhupada, who was also interested. At first, Surabi resented that the work was being taken out of his hands, but after meeting with Mr. Deer, he also liked the proposed change. Good lesson there is that we should put forward the service more than just what we want to do. We may be holding something back simply because we're attached to doing it. If we're not doing it right, someone else can do it better. The contract was made with ECC, and Mr. Deer presented a progress chart detailing each phase of the work and showing when it would be completed. Srila Prabhupada was pleased with their professional methods despite higher cost. Now the work would be done as professionally and as quickly as possible, and this was what mattered most. Srila Prabhupada ki. And we see that the buildings are still standing. They didn't fall apart in 2 or 3 years. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from the 5th canto or the 1st?
It's the 3rd canto. Sorry, I couldn't regard the book, but it's on the screen.
Which verse is it?
315.
I can read up on this.
Let me see if we've got it here.
Third canto,
3:15.
313, so
313, text 15.
yeah.
Okay, reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 13, did you say?
Yeah.
And that's entitled to
615, so you can do like a few texts until you decide whether to next week.
okay.
This is somebody in the ground.
Starting from 15, did you say?
Yeah.
O Master of the demigods, please attempt to lift the earth which is merged in the great water, because it is the dwelling place for all the living entities. It can be done by your endeavour and by the mercy of the Lord. Sri Maitreya said, thus seeing the earth merged in the water, Brahma gave his attention for a long time to how it could be lifted. According to Jiva Goswami, the topics delineated here are the different millenniums. The present topics are the Sweta Varaha millennium, and topics regarding the Chakshusha millennium will also be discussed in this chapter. Brahma thought, while I have been engaged in the process of creation, the earth has been inundated by a deluge and has gone down into the depths of the ocean. What can we do who are engaged in this matter of creation? It is best to let the Almighty direct us. The devotees of the Lord, who are all confidential servitors, are sometimes perplexed in the discharge of their respective duties, but they are never discouraged. They have full faith in the Lord, and He paves the way for the smooth progress of the devotee's duty. O sinless Vidura, all of a sudden, while Brahma was engaged in thinking, a small form of a boar came out of his nostril. The measurement of the creature was not more than the upper portion of a thumb. O descendant of Bharat, while Brahma was observing him, that boar became situated in the sky in a wonderful manifestation as gigantic as a great elephant. Struck with wonder at observing the wonderful boar-like form in the sky, Brahma, with great Brahmins like Marichi as well as Kumaras and Manu, began to argue in various ways. Is this some extraordinary entity come in pretense of a boar? It is very wonderful that he has come from my nose. First of all, this boar was seen no bigger than the tip of a thumb, and within a moment he was as large as a stone. My mind is perturbed to see the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vishnu. Since Brahma is the supermost person in the universe, and he had never before experienced such a form, he could guess that the wonderful appearance of the boar was an incarnation of Vishnu. The uncommon features symptomatic of the incarnation of Godhead can bewilder even the mind of Brahma. While Brahma was deliberating with his sons, the Supreme Person of Godhead, Vishnu, roared tumultuously like a great mountain. It appears that great hills and mountains also have their roaring power because they are also living entities. The volume of the sound vibrated as in proportion to the size of the material body. While Brahma was guessing about the appearance of the Lord's incarnation as a boar, the Lord confirmed Brahma's contemplation by roaring with his gorgeous voice. The omnipotent Supreme Personality of Godhead enlivened Brahma and the other highly elevated Brahmins by again roaring with his uncommon voice, which echoed in all directions. Brahma and other enlightened Brahmins who know the Supreme Personality of Godhead are enlivened by the appearance of the Lord in any of his multi-incarnations. The appearance of the wonderful and gigantic incarnation of Vishnu as a mountain-like boar did not fill them with any kind of fear, although the Lord's resounding voice was tumultuous and echoed horribly in all directions as an open threat to all demons who might challenge his omnipotency. Just a little comment when I get back to the camera. Instead of to read, when I go back to the screen, I can do both. So an interesting point here Srila Prabhupada makes in the purport is that the Lord's voice was considered gorgeous. So to the devotees, the Lord is considered to be like a rose, and to the non-devotees, he was seen to be like a thunderbolt. So here it was described also that the Lord's voice was horrible. So to the devotees it's gorgeous, and to the non-devotees then it's considered horrible. And this is also considered the materialists who make this life and this world as the all in all. Then they spend all their time treading on other people and exploiting the resources of material nature so that they can have a higher level of enjoyment for their senses, and they can puff themselves up with great importance. And when death comes, then it's a big upheaval, a big inconvenience to say the least. But for the devotee, they see the Lord coming. When death comes, they see, this is Krishna come to take me. So, let's see. Goes this way, is it? When the great sages and thinkers who are residents of Janaloka, Taplaloka and Satyaloka heard the tumultuous voice of Lord Bore, which was the auspicious sound of the all-merciful Lord, they chanted auspicious chants from the three Vedas. The word Maya Maya is very significant in this verse. Maya means mercy, specific knowledge, and also illusion. Therefore, Lord Bore is everything. He is merciful, he is all knowledge, and he is illusion also. The sound which he vibrated as the Bore incarnation was answered by the Vedic hymns of the great sages in the planets Janaloka, Taplaloka, and Satyaloka. The highest intellectuals and pious living entities live in those planets, and when they heard the extraordinary voice of the Bore, they could understand that the specific sound was vibrated by the Lord and no one else. Therefore they replied by praying to the Lord with Vedic hymns. The earth planet was submerged in the mire, but on hearing the sound of the Lord, the inhabitants of the higher planets were all jubilant because they knew that the Lord was there to deliver the earth. Therefore Brahma and all the sages, such as Bhrigu, Brahma's other sons and learned Brahmins, were enlivened, and they concertedly joined in praising the Lord with the transcendental vibrations of the Vedic hymns. The most important is the Varahadev Prana verse, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Now, we'll just speak a little bit and then read a few more verses. So when the Lord appears, he achieves many things. At least some of them we can be aware of, but there's probably so many which we're not aware of. When he does one thing, it appears like he's doing one thing, but he's also doing so many other things. So he would be like the original and the supreme multitasker. Sometimes people become proud of their ability to so-called multitask. But there's also some questions regarding that. Is it the human can actually only focus on one thing at a time? Someone's brain may be able to go from one thing to another quicker. So anyway, essentially the purpose of the Lord's appearance is always Pritranaya Sadhunam Vinashaya Chaduskritam Dharma Samstapanartaya Sambhavami Yuge Yuge. Does anybody know the English translation? Paritranaya Sadhunam.
I know that to deliver the pious.
Exactly. So in order to Pritranaya Sadhunam, deliver the pious, the sadhus, Vinashaya, destroy. Vinashaya Chaduskritam, the Duskritas, or the miscreants. I vet myself millennium after millennium. And then there's another verse. Yeah, as well as to re-establish the principles of religion. Idahi dahi dharmasya, glanir bharata bharata, abhutanam dharmasya, tadatnam shajam. Anyone give the English for that?
Whenever there's a decline of religious practice, he descends.
At that time I invent myself.
At that time he descends himself to establish the religious principle. Something like that.
Thereabouts. That's the essential meaning of it. So, in Kali Yuga, the Lord is appearing in the form of the Holy Name. And He's delivering everybody. If someone says, where is God, can you show me God? We'll say, chant Hare Krishna. No, I want to see God, so chant Hare Krishna. So they won't even know God if you said, well, okay, here's God in the temple, and they still won't accept. And even if God appeared before them, then unless it was like a universal form and they were full of fear, because generally people are just so engrossed in modes of ignorance and passion, they couldn't even recognize God. And even sometimes devotees don't recognize God because there's examples of Krishna appearing to someone and then after he goes away they say, oh no, that was Krishna. They realized there was Madhavendra Puri was in Vrindavan and he was fasting and Krishna came to him to bring him some milk, I think it was. And he says, oh, but I'm fasting. And this little cowherd boy says, oh, nobody fasts in my village, you have to take this milk or my mum will be upset. okay, I'll take it. And then, so he took it and said, oh, that's a charming little boy. And then went away and realised that was Krishna. So Krishna can cover us with Mahamaya if we want to forget him, or he can cover us with Yogamaya for pastime activities. So the Lord, He does invent Himself for many different reasons, and one of the other reasons is to experience and to exhibit sporting activity, just like in human society and even animal society. Sometimes you see dogs that are rolling around with each other and they're biting but they're not hurting each other, they're just playing in a sporting way. And humans do that too, they have sports, like we have the whole football World Cup thing, we have the Olympic Games. So people like to engage in sporting activities, and this is coming from Krishna. Everything which we can see is a perverted reflection of what already exists in the Supreme. So the story is, in order for Krishna to experience some sporting activities, then it requires some devotees. So there was these two devotees of Lord Vishnu, Jai and Vijay, and the Lord had made an arrangement where they would take birth to engage in some sporting activities. They were so powerful that neither the humans nor the demigods could control them in any way, because they're actually Vishnudutas. So the Vishnudutas are so powerful, we cannot underestimate them. When Ravan Ravan, he actually was another demon, and he took on the Yamadutas as a fight, and he was getting annihilated by them. Although he couldn't be conquered by any of the demigods or any great kings, then the Yamadutas, he couldn't actually defeat them, and they could kill them, but then the message came that they should spare him because he's supposed to take part in a pastime. So the Vishnudutas, of course Ravan originally was a Vishnuduta as one of the Jai and Vijay guards. But the Vishnudutas, they can easily defeat the Yamadutas. So when Jai and Vijay, who originally were Vishnudutas, were cursed by the four Kumaras because they would not allow them entry to see Lord Narayan. These four Kumaras, previously they were impersonalists, and they were not Mayavadis, they didn't deny the form of the Lord, they were just not aware of it. Their realization was Brahman realization. But when they smelled the Tulsi flowers, the manjaris offered to Krishna's lotus feet, then immediately they became personalists. So they were great devotees, appearing just like young boys of 4 or 5-year-old, and there was 4 of them. And typically when kids are very small, sometimes they don't even wear clothes because they're not aware of the need to be modest and things like that. they're not in that type of consciousness. They're very pure and simple. So these sages wanted to remain like that, and they chose to stay in the bodies of small children. As a result, then the Vishnu Dutas, by the Lord's arrangement, just regarded them as being simply small boys. Now the Vishnu Dutas were eternally liberated souls, so they would be able to recognize normally they would be able to recognize the spiritual qualities, but by the Lord's divine energy, then they turned the boys away, who then became angry, and these great sages cursed them to take birth. So they're given the choice: you can take birth, was it 7 times as my devotees, or 3 times as my enemy? And they said, well, we'd rather get back to our service soon, so we'll take birth 3 times as your enemies. So, Hiranyaksha and Hiranyakashipu, they were the sons of, can anyone tell me? And Aditya and Kashyapa Muni. So we said that at the time of the state of mind at the time of conception will determine the child. Therefore, it's a great responsibility of the parents to be in good consciousness, to be Krishna conscious. And therefore, Prabhupada said that before begetting children, the devotees should chant at least 50 rounds. So this way, they're simply just absorbed in Krishna consciousness. And in this way, they can produce good offspring, which will alleviate the burden of the world and not become a burden to the world. So there's a type of offspring called Varnashankara. Varnashankara means unwanted progeny, which simply create a disturbance in the world. So by the Lord's arrangement also, then Kashyapa Muni, who was a great powerful sage, and his wife, who was also a very chaste, humble and sincere devotee, both of the Lord and of our very powerful sage husband. But one time, it was an inauspicious date on the calendar, and she became very lusty. And so Kashyapa Muni was very angry that he had to satisfy her desire. And therefore, when he was in great anger at the time of conception, then these 2 boys, these twin boys, Hiranyaksha and Hiranyakashipu, were born. They were conceived and then born sometime later. So it's considered that Hiranyakashipu is the older brother of Hiranyaksha. As such, quite often the younger brother tries to impress and please. And although they're twins, in the Vedic conception, the one who is born first is the youngest. Because it's like the one who goes in first is the oldest. He comes out last. So that's the Vedic understanding. So Hiranyaksha was considered slightly younger, and he accepted that role. And he was always trying to please his older brother Hiranyakashipu, so he'd go around conquering over the demigods and just trying to expand his territory. And he was creating so much trouble. Often when there's trouble created, the demigods will go to the shore of the milk ocean. What's the name for the milk ocean? Any of the Baptists know? Ocean of milk. And then for Lord Vishnu. No, other one. Yeah. So, or sometimes pronounced Kirodak, just like we have Kir. Kir is like milk. It's milk. And Kirodak or Kshirodak is Shai Vishnu. So Vishnu lies in the ocean of milk. So they approached and they asked the Lord for help. So we can see this is another thing that the Lord does. If the demigods begin to forget Krishna somehow, or in order to help them remember, then he may create some disturbance so that they come and take shelter. Or you can see it that when there is some disturbance, that's when they remember Krishna. And sometimes we're like that, we can forget Krishna until there's a disturbance, then, oh, I better go and take shelter of Krishna, there's trouble now. So this is a kind of materialistic type of attitude. There's four types of people who approach Krishna. One of them is one who's looking for relief from material distress. And of course, it's better that we approach Krishna in these times than not approach him. But we can also try to approach him at other times. We don't have to wait till we're distressed. Don't have to wait till we're hanging on by the skin of our teeth, by hanging on by a thread before we go and take shelter in Krishna. We can try to take shelter in Krishna all the time, because by reading Srila Prabhupada's books, by hearing this philosophy of Bhagavatam, we can understand the material world is a dangerous place. We might be feeling okay just now, but at any moment, slight adjustment can create some havoc. So therefore, we always have to be pushing the mind to remember Krishna and pushing yourself to engage in Krishna consciousness. If not, then if we're not prepared to do that, then we will experience the big upheaval like the materialist experience at the time of death if we don't remember Krishna. So this human form of life is a great opportunity for remembering Krishna. And typically whenever there's a problem that the demigods can't solve, as part of their service they try to solve it on their own, but when it becomes too troublesome, then they approach Vishnu. So usually a boar is found in unclean places. If you ever go to Vrindavan, maybe some other places, then the sewage system, at least until recently, had been for many, many years, is that they have open sewers and the hogs come and they stick themselves right into the sewer and they get right into the nectar. They're looking for some nice tasty foodstuffs. So therefore they say there's nothing less valuable than hog stool. Bhaktivinoda Thakur says that false prestige is as valuable as the dung of a boar. So a hog will eat everyone else's stool, but no one will eat the hog stool. So this is the conception of the hog, that it goes to a dirty place, but then its service is that it cleans that dirty place. So the Lord took this incarnation of Varaha. Does anybody know another name for Lord Varaha? Begins with S. Sukara Rupa. So that's another name for Lord Varaha. So the Lord took this incarnation because the earth had been knocked out of its orbit and had been fallen down into the Garbhodak ocean. And the Lord very easily took it up and put it back into where it belongs. Put it safely, returned it safely. So just as a boar would go to a dirty place, so he also went to the bottom of the universe, to the nether regions it's described. He went there and elevated the earth planet. He brought Bhumandala, the earth, safely back to where it belongs. So this, the Lord appears in every millennium. Sometimes he appears as a Yuga avatar, or an incarnation who will introduce the Yuga Dharma. Just like the Supreme Lord himself personally came as Lord Chaitanya to introduce the Yuga Dharma of Harinam Eva Kevalam Kalonas Jiva Gatira Nita. So in this age of Kali, then the method for God realization, the method for self-realization is Harinam Sankirtan, the congregational chanting of the holy name. So within this International Society for Krishna Consciousness, all the members, including those living in the temples and those living at home, living outside of the temple, then their mission is to help propagate this mission of Lord Chaitanya, to spread the holy name to every town and village, and to support that in whatever way they can. So together we can't do, individually we cannot do very much, but together as a team, then we can all do something together and make significant improvements for the upliftment of the fallen conditioned souls. So in Kali Yuga, the Lord appears in the form of the holy name. And therefore, when we go out on Harinam Sankirtan, sometimes we see people immediately attracted, simply by the chanting of the holy name. Momentarily, the veil of Maya is lifted, and they're thinking, well, what is this? This is so attractive. And just like in that bhajan, I think it's Manasadeho Gelo Jogi Chamora, or was it? Whichever one it was. And then there was one bhajan where, I think it's back to the Thakur bhajan, where they were talking about Lord Shiva was dancing in kirtan, Lord Brahma was dancing in kirtan, and then some, even though they couldn't dance, in their minds they were dancing. So this is sometimes what's going on. We shouldn't underestimate the effect of the holy name on the fallen conditioned souls. When we go out there, many of them are thinking, I wish I could join in with that. So immediately they're reconnecting with Krishna. In the material world, there's always two types of people, the divine and the demoniac, the suras and the asuras. So, even when we're in Harinam, sometimes we'll see some people, their initial reaction is actually hostile. Some people don't appreciate the chanting of the holy name. Just like Jaga and Madai, they were absorbed in their senses, and the chanting of the holy name was a disturbance to their sense enjoyment. They didn't want to be awoken from their deep Maya. And incidentally, Jagai and Madai were also incarnations of Jai and Vijay, as in Hiranyakashipu, Hiranyaksha. So they were only cursed to take birth 3 times. So the first incarnations were, anybody?
Hiranyaksha,
And then the second incarnations were?
Ravana and Kumbhakarna.
Ravana and Kumbhakarna. And then the third, which was in Krishna Lila. Krishna Lila.
Shishupala.
And Danta.
Vakra.
So they'd already done their 3, they'd done their time, so why did they appear again as Jagai and Madai? Does anybody remember?
They got fired up, loved it.
Yeah. So they came back for?
4 times.
They came back, it was considered they came back for an encore. So just as sometimes you may have some musicians playing and everybody likes it so much, they don't let them leave the stage, they're like, more, encore, encore. So they had pleased the Lord so much by taking birth as these demons, so that the Lord can display so many pastimes, deliver the devotees, etc., re-establish principles of religion, teach so many lessons, just like we have the Varahadev Prana and the Singha Prana. So there's many different scriptures which are always there for the upliftment of the living entities. So the Lord was so pleased that they came back for an encore as Jagai and Madai and Chaitanya Lila. They didn't have to come back, but this was a special reward they got for doing this, that they got to engage in the pastimes of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and get love of God. So this was a special reward that the Lord gave them for service. So as well as being the so the Lord, He normally comes and He rescues the devotees and He destroys the demons, kills them. But in Kali Yuga, that's different. Can anyone say what the difference is? He doesn't have any weapons, He doesn't kill anybody. So how does that play out in Kali Yuga? Liberating the devotees and destroying the demons.
Killing the demoniac mentality.
Exactly. So this philosophy of Krishna consciousness, which is given by the Acharyas and by the Supreme Lord through Bhagavad Gita and Bhagavatam, then this is meant for destroying the demonic mentality. And that demonic mentality is basically through Nirvishesha Shunyavadi, through atheism and impersonalism. And basically to show compassion upon all the living entities, because in Kali Yuga it's considered that everyone has got the capacity to be either a demon or a devotee. So when one hears the holy name and one hears this philosophy of Krishna consciousness and engages in devotional service, then we cultivate the devotee aspect. So just like there's this American Indian saying that there's two wills fighting, and within, isn't it? And which one will win? The one which you feed most. So if we feed our mind, then the mind will remain strong, and the poor little spirit soul will be bewildered because the mind's in control. And when we feed the spirit soul by nourishing it with hearing and chanting and praying, engaging in devotional service, etc., then the mind becomes subdued and the soul becomes the controller. The higher self becomes in control. So it's interesting that Hiranyaksha was terrorizing, and he came to Varaha when he was very powerful, Varuna, the god of waters, the god of the ocean. And he challenged Varuna to a fight. Varuna ran away, but finally he found him. And when he found him, then he challenged him to fight. He said, actually, you should go and fight with Lord Vishnu, who's appeared in the form of a boar. And when Hiranyaksha thought, yes, this will be a good fight, he sought out Lord Vishnu. And when as soon as he started to insult him, he said, no, you're just a forest beast. He says, today I should enliven my kinsman by killing you, O fool. So he called the Lord a fool, and he was so deluded he couldn't recognise, but we can see from what we read earlier on that the demigods, when they heard the Lord's voice and they seen the Lord's form, immediately could recognise this as a divine manifestation of Vishnu. But the demons couldn't recognise that. They just thought, who's this upstart? Let me annihilate him, let me send him to his death. So they fought for some time, and Hiranyaksha was such a powerful person that even the demigods were running from him. So they fought for some time, and just as if people go to watch the theatre or they watch a movie, and they know the good guy's always going to come out in the end, but they get absorbed in the movie, they get absorbed in the book or whatever, and they're thinking, oh no, the hero's hanging from a cliff, how's he going to get out of this one? Just like when we were kids, almost every week Batman was hanging from a cliff. And then he would come back next week, somehow or other he would have been saved, otherwise there'd be no next week. So you know that pretty much 99% of the time the hero is going to get out of it somehow or another. But to create a little bit of entertainment and to create a bit of tension and attachment, then the Lord would sometimes, it would appear that he was being dealt a blow by Hiranyaksha, and it would appear like there was some fight going on. But ultimately when the Lord got tired of playing with him, then he just slapped him indifferently, and then he fell down dead, his eyes bulged out of his head, and blood was coming from his mouth, etc. So this was the Lord displaying that he wasn't actually struggling to defeat Hiranyaksha, he was just having a bit of fun. And when he decided, okay, thumbs up, just give a little cuff to the ear, a little slap to the ear, and then he was gone. And then the demigods noticed that they were becoming such great anxiety that finally the Lord just dispatched Hiranyaksha. And they noticed that Hiranyaksha's form was actually glowing. And they were wondering, why is he glowing? He's just been killed. And then you could see that his foot was actually touching, or his body was touching the foot of Lord Varaha. And this is how, because the Lord's form is effulgent, when the Lord is there, his effulgence is always there. Just like the sun is there. The sun is not there without the sunshine. So similarly, the Lord is there, his effulgence is there. And by coming into contact with the Lord, then even this dead demon's body was becoming effulgent. So Hiranyaksha was considered to be the original demon, and Varahadev therefore would be the first of the Das avatars, first of the 10 incarnations. Yeah, so sometimes we'll see depictions and descriptions in the Shastra that Lord Varahadev is a kind of reddish colour, and other times he's a blonde colour. And can anyone answer why this is so? Is this some kind of discrepancy?
Born in a different kalpa.
That's right. So one was in the Chakshusha Manu, another one was the Swayambhuva millennium. So because the Lord appears, when he appears, he doesn't just appear once in that form, although he can appear in any form which has never been seen before. But when he appears, then he appears scheduled incarnations, just like in the Srimad Bhagavatam, first canto, there's a chapter called Scheduled Incarnations, and there it's mentioned which forms of the Lord appear and which ages. And some of them have appeared, and some of them have appeared since it was written, and some are yet to appear. So of course the devotees who have faith in this, then they get the benefit of applying that faith. There's others who try to decry the authority of the Vedic scriptures, just like we were discussing recently. Someone manufactured this person called Varahadev, who was just some invention to try to diminish the faith in the Vedas. But modern society is proud of their achievements, but there's an old saying, there's nothing new under the sun. So Veda means knowledge, and all the knowledge which people have is just simply a way of manipulating material energy, and there's nothing new about it. So the Vedic literatures, they give so much knowledge of so many sciences which are now starting to actually become understood in different ways. But for the devotees, they don't have to be scientifically proven. It can help, but the devotees who engage in devotional service, they experience a higher taste, and therefore they're able to give up the material pursuits. And ultimately, Jain Vijay, as Hiranyaksha and Hiranyakashipu, finally took birth as Jagai and Madai, and they were liberated and returned to the spiritual world. So this form of the Lord, Lord Varahadev, we can pray to him on these appearance days. We pray to the Lord for specific things, and sometimes we can pray, for example, to Lord Varahadev that we've allowed our heart to fall into the depths of Maya. Please pick it up and rescue me from this repeated birth and death. Please rescue me from this consciousness, this muddy mire consciousness, the mire of Maya. So on appearance days of the Lord, then there's special blessings. You get the special blessings of a particular incarnation. So I'd just like to ask, does anybody know, the different demons represent different qualities or disqualifications, you could say. Does anybody know what is the qualification of Hiranyaksha? or what is the quality?
Lust
Lust. Can you explain why it was lust?
is, well, one indication is his name is Hiranya Gold and Kashipu means bed.
No, Hiranyaksha.
Oh, Hiranyaksha. Oh, sorry.
Hiranyaksha means golden eyed.
Right.
So, does anybody know what it was? Because if Hiranyakashipu was lust, then Hiranyaksha would be something else. Could be greed.
I don't
So, you know?
it's supposed to be.
Certainly he was greedy because he was always trying to expand his territory, that's mentioned in the Shastra. And whether golden-eyed meant physically he had eyes of gold, or whether he just always conquering to steal gold. I was trying to find out about that, but I couldn't find out.
Yeah, the only demons listed here, Takabhakti, are the ones that Krishna killed.
Yeah, there is some in the Shastra which mentions it. So if anyone can find out, they can share that. Does anyone get any questions or comments?
One comment was that you were saying there's nothing new under the sun, and sometimes Srila Prabhupada explains that when a person dies, he goes into a coma, and sometimes the reason is because it's something that they're going to try and work out what they're going to do with this one. Is the person so demoniac that it's not a normal reaction that he has to get? There has to be some special arrangement paid for it.
Can be. But there's many people who go into comas who also come out of comas. So it's not necessarily that everyone goes into a coma is an exceptionally big demon.
Yeah.
Because even devotees who have been in accidents go into coma and then come back out again. But yeah, that can be there. And it does say that those Kshatriyas who irresponsibly punish innocent people or who attack other kingdoms and disrupt the peace in the world, then they receive a very heavy punishment from the Supreme Lord. So if we think, of course, these particular incarnations of the Lord and the devotees who are playing the parts of Hiranyaksha and Hiranyakashipu, then we shouldn't consider them as like ordinary nasty little demons. They're coming from the spiritual world to engage in God's pastimes for His pleasure. Yes.
There was one part where it mentioned that a demon is afraid of death, and if you're not a demon, then you're not afraid of death. So, if you are afraid of death, then does that mean to the extent that you're afraid of death, to the extent you're a demon?
To the extent we're afraid of death is to the extent of our ignorance, because we are thinking that we're going to die, or we're afraid we're going to lose something, because attachment, fear and anger. So when attachment is there, then there's fear. When the devotee is attached to Krishna, then he's afraid to commit offences. He's afraid to displease the Lord or the devotees. So those qualities are always there, but it's how they're related. Are they related to Krishna? Are they related to material energy? So attachment, fear and anger. So from attachment, we're afraid of losing that attachment, that we get married, and we're afraid to lose our beautiful spouse. So we have to be very protective. What was the old song, when you're in love with a beautiful woman, you watch your friends. Right? So maybe people experience that you have a nice girlfriend or boyfriend, and then you become very maybe jealous if you see them speaking with one of your friends for longer than a couple of seconds. You think, oh, this guy's at it, like they'll land one on him. Or we become suspicious, and then that kind of suspicion and jealousy, that can destroy the relationship itself, even if there's nothing there. So there are fears there. And then anger comes from that as well. If we lose something, or the fear of losing it may cause us to become angry too. So the demons, or the non-devotees, or the materialists, spend their whole life amassing material wealth or amassing fame. Some people even forego wealth simply to be famous as a great scholar, a great professor. They become very institutionalized in the university circuit and so they can get a good name after themselves. And if someone who's younger and appears to be less experienced says something which challenges that person, they become very angry. And then if they even get proven to be right, then they may be fearful they're going to lose their standing in that intellectual community. So it does kind of permeate all the different aspects of material life, and to the extent where someone may simply be having a job, they're working under a boss and they have to please the boss, so they're afraid they're going to lose their job because they need that money, because it helps them get the things they're attached to. So people allow themselves to be manipulated by someone else just so they can get some money to attend to their basic needs in life. Not necessarily inspired to get up in the morning and go to work. Quite often people work in jobs they don't like because they need to get something to make ends meet. But Srila Prabhupada says that human life is meant for more than that. It's meant for self-realization. And one cannot maintain one's human body without work. We can't even maintain the material body without work. So we have to engage in some work. So he's not saying that we should be lazy. Prabhupada said no lazies and no crazies. It's not easy to be a devotee if you're crazy or if you're lazy, because lazy would mean we can't even engage in devotional service, or lazy intellectually where we don't think, we don't try to engage our mind in devotional service. And if we're crazy, it means our mind is too fickle, it's too disturbed, it's too distracted. And of course we can overcome these things by engaging in devotional service, because in Kali Yuga it says that everybody is lazy. And also in the material world, Prabhupada says that everybody's crazy to some degree or another. So although it may appear, I'm lazy and I'm a bit crazy, and I can't be a devotee, and Prabhupada was not of the mood also to allow people to think that they can disqualify themselves from devotional service. He would always try to qualify them. So even if they have a crazy mind, the best thing to do is engage it in devotional service. The mind is crazy because it's uncontrolled, different degrees of it. And we're lazy simply because we have not been inspired by anything in the material world, so that itself shows that the material world has nothing to offer us. Or in Kali Yuga, we just want everything easily. Typically, there's such a thing as Dharma, Artha, Kama and Moksha. Can anyone tell me what these are? Dharma, Artha, Kama and Moksha?
Religion, economic development, sense gratification, and liberation.
Exactly. So Dharma is religiosity, Artha is economic development, Kama is sense gratification, and Moksha is liberation. So typically people who wanted to enjoy sense gratification, in order to avoid karmic reactions, they perform karma kanda activities, pious activities, and then they get good karma where they would get their desires fulfilled, and they would avoid getting some kind of punishment from material energy for that, because they went according to the Vedic rules and rites. And so they perform their economic development in such a way which was governed by rules of Dharma, and they'd be very careful not to do anything adharmic, which would bring impiety or bad fortune upon themselves. And then ultimately they work through that and come to the point of liberation. But in Kali Yuga, most people don't even want to work for a living. They just want sense gratification handed on a plate. The world owes me. I've done nothing in the world. I've contributed nothing. I've just come into this world. It already exists. The roads are there, the buildings are there, the whole network of infrastructure to support everything's there. I've done nothing to contribute to it, but somehow or another I feel like everyone should just serve me hand and foot. I should just be given everything and I shouldn't be asked to do anything. So such a entitled mood, which is completely devoid of appreciation for everyone who came before us and the sacrifices made before us, is typical of Kali Yuga. Lazy, misguided, unlucky, and above all was disturbed. And I seen a little YouTube clip of this teenager who wouldn't do anything, who was left some chores to do, wouldn't do anything. And the father was so upset with him, and while he was talking to the kid and trying to put him right, the kid's just on the phone. He's been on the phone all day. He just takes the phone, takes it off, and he throws it out the window into the swimming pool in the back garden. And then the kid's totally freaking out, having a meltdown, like he's about ready to just leave his body. And you can see this is such an unfortunate situation, that if we allow ourselves to be so distracted by Maya that we can't even realise that somebody's tolerating us to put food in our mouth, to put a roof over our head, and even give the person the phone that they've got, and the person's so ignorant that they don't even acknowledge that the person is giving them the facility to ignore them. So this is what we're like with Krishna also, is that Krishna's given us all facility. He's given us a tool where we can maintain our body, we can still have some enjoyment, and all we have to do is just recognise that He's giving everything, and just be appreciative of that, and do a few chores, which will help us as well. That's all that's been asked of us. And if we take that, then the Supreme Lord is pleased. He doesn't need anything from us, but He's pleased just as the child who gets pocket money when it's the parent's birthday. The child saves up the pocket money and buys the mother or the father a nice present, and they're very pleased with that because they think this is good. The child's learning how to appreciate, it's learning the value of reciprocation, it's learning the value of appreciating that someone's doing something to help them and to look after them in life. So that type of thing is encouraged. So someone who lives without appreciation certainly won't live a very happy life. Appreciation is for mental and spiritual strength, then learning how to appreciate, learning how to share, and learning how to respect. These are three things which are very valuable in the life of a devotee. Okay, and this is the thing about the demoniac, is that they look for respect. They don't necessarily want to give it. They don't want to share. They want everything for me, I, me, and mine. And the bigger the demon, the bigger the I, me, and mine, or vice versa. And appreciation, they want to be appreciated, but they don't necessarily appreciate others. So these things, if we cultivate these things, then we transform our heart more to be in the divine way of thinking than in the asuric or demoniac way of thinking. And that choice is ours. Anyone got any last comments or questions? Let's go around the key. Prabhupada ki, Shri Gordon Time Appreciation ki, Shri Varahadev ki,
Jai. Haribol. Prabhupada Prana Prabhu ki.